and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for having me here today. Yes, I'm Georgia Mills. I'm a research project manager at UCL, and today I'm going to talk to you about EJS ACT-PD, which I know we've already heard about a little bit. So I'm going to focus more on what the trial itself looks like. We've recently opened to recruitment, which is really exciting, and we'll be rolling out that recruitment across the UK over the next few months. So I'm going to go over a bit more about what the trial looks like if you were to take part, and also how you can get involved if you're interested. So a quick bit of background on EJS ACT-PD. It's a really exciting project. It was set up with the aim of revolutionising clinical trials in Parkinson's disease. So we started the initiative back in 2021, and then over the past few years, we've pulled together expert members from across the UK and internationally. And this has very much included people with Parkinson's and their partners and care partners as well. And we've all worked together to design the trial that we hope will find answers faster. And as again, has already been mentioned, our focus is very much on treatments that may be able to slow or stop Parkinson's progression. And I had put this in, I feel like we've probably covered what a MAMS trial is already today as well, but just as a very brief overview of how we do plan to speed this up, we'll be testing multiple treatments in the trial. They'll all be tested in separate treatment arms, so we don't have any drug combinations at the moment, but the trial has been set up that it can grow and adapt over time. But for the time being, we have separate treatment arms, but they'll all be tested at the same time. And of course, that means we'll get answers about several treatments, but in a single trial. We'll be using those early checks to see whether the treatments are safe and whether they're working. And as mentioned, that means we can identify any ineffective treatments early and we can stop further recruitment. And in line with that, the design is flexible. So whilst we can stop treatments that aren't working, we can also introduce new treatment arms as we go without needing to stop the trial or set up a separate trial. So as we move forwards and identify future promising drugs, we can continue to introduce those into the trial infrastructure. So this is what the trial looks like at the moment. That setup process was very much what the initiative was set up to do, to design the trial. And now we're working closely with the Medical Research Council Clinical Trials Unit, who are working on setting up all of those delivery sites and opening those across the UK. And we're opening 3 arms to start with. So we have that shared placebo arm at the start. And we also have 2 treatment arms that we're opening from now. And then we're planning to introduce the 3rd treatment arm about 12 months in, so hopefully around September next year. And you can see on here as well that all of those treatment arms are still include your usual care for Parkinson's disease. So no one will have to stop or change their Parkinson's treatment to take part in the trial. And I'll run through these checks just briefly in what they mean for our trial itself. So the stage 1 and 2 checks, they will be looking at whether the treatment is safe and whether it seems to be working. So essentially, is it showing enough signs of activity that we think we should continue recruitment? And we're expecting those to take place, I think it's around 2.2 years in and 3.3 years in. And that is when we expect to have enough participants recruited and enough data for those treatments to check whether we want to continue them. If at any of those time points a treatment doesn't seem to be working, we'll remove it from the trial and we'll stop recruitment. And we had a few questions about this on the break. So if you were allocated to one of those treatment arms and it did stop early because it didn't appear to be working, you can rejoin the trial. There'll be a 6-week period where you have to wait for all of that treatment to leave your system. And then you'll be able to recomplete the interest form and go back through that screening process and rejoin the trial. So I just wanted to touch on that because I'm not sure if it's in any of the slides specifically. As the treatments continue, we'll go through to that stage 3 and stage 4 test, and they are to check whether the treatment is working, whether it's effective or not. Normally, you'd wait until that stage 4 time point to check for this, but we really want to get any effective treatments out in the Parkinson's community as quickly as we can. So we work with the statisticians and we've put that stage 3 test in as an early check. If any of the drugs are showing a really strong response and we can say at that time point they're effective, it means we can stop recruitment there. We can start working on getting the drug out into the community. If we don't have enough data at that time point, we'll just carry on recruitment until that stage 4, and that's the final check. And we're expecting that to be around 6 years or so after the trial opens. And the reason for that time frame is, of course, we need a certain amount of time to recruit all the participants to the trial, and then for them to take the treatments for long enough to give us enough data to let us know whether that treatment's working or not. And a really quick overview, we've touched on some of this already, but in terms of trial length, if you do take part in the trial, you'll be asked to take the study medication for up to 3 years. Obviously, if you're on an arm that ends early, that might be less than 3 years, but it would never be any longer. We're recruiting 1,600 participants at the moment. That's across all the trial arms that are currently open, but the plan is to open new arms as we move forward. And we're recruiting participants from more than 40 sites across the UK. So that includes England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. We've really tried to get a good geographical spread there so that no one has to travel too far to their delivery site. As I've mentioned, we're starting with 2 treatments, introducing the third one after a year's time, and hopefully be able to introduce new treatments as we move forward. And a really key thing here is we understand the trial length is quite long. It's 3 years to take part. However, to try and make this as easy as possible, after that first appointment, which has to take place in person, you can take part in the rest of the study visits from home if you wish to. So that can be via video call or, if needed, a telephone call for some of those visits. And that's really up to your preference when you're participating in the trial. So if you would rather go in and see someone, that's fine. If it's easy for you to have that appointment from home, that's also fine. You can work with your delivery site on that. And the trial has been very generously funded by charities and government, including, of course, Cure Parkinson's. And in terms of how we selected the treatments, I'm just going to go over a kind of brief overview of the whole treatment selection process. So we had a treatment selection working group whose focus was to set up a robust treatment selection process that we can replicate as we move forwards and look at new drugs in the future. So we were very much focused initially on the scientific evidence. So after we identified all of these potential treatments, of course, we want to think about why might it work for Parkinson's, and specifically why might it work on disease progression. And to look at that, we thought about the other trials that have been done and the different evidence and results of those. And we also, of course, had to think about whether it's safe to use in a Parkinson's population. After considering all the evidence, we then had to think about, can we make it work in the trial? So in this trial, no one will know what treatment they're taking. That includes participants and the site staff, so everything has to look the same. And we had to think about that when selecting the treatments. Can we make them look the same? Are they taken in a similar way, for example? What safety checks are needed? And is the treatment acceptable for people with Parkinson's to take and to take over a long period of time in relation to both those safety checks and potential side effects, for example? And so our PPIE group was really key here in helping us think about whether people would be happy to take these treatments whilst they take part in the trial. And then we had to think about the supply. So can we afford it? Is it easy to find? And can we get a large enough amount over a long enough time frame to have it throughout the whole trial period? Who owns it and can we use it? So there was lots to think about. But the primary focus for us here was really thinking about how promising those treatments were and what the evidence looked like, and then trying to overcome any of the other challenges afterwards related to including it in the trial. And I'm just going to focus on the first 2 treatments for now, because that's what our current trial is recruiting to. So I won't focus as much on that third treatment that's going to open later on. But at the moment, we have decided on the first 2 treatment arms as telmisartan and terazosin. They're both repurposed drugs. So they're currently used for other conditions, which means that we know what their safety profile looks like, and we have a really good understanding of that. So treatment group 1 here is telmisartan. It's an antihypertensive. So I'm not a clinical staff member, so I'm going to go through these in quite a brief overview, top level kind of overview of why they might work. But that's going to be prescribed in the trial as 40 milligrams, and it's taken once per day. The reason we think it might work in Parkinson's is that it helps to regulate inflammation in the brain, which we know is relevant to Parkinson's. Data shows there's a reduced risk of a Parkinson's diagnosis in users of telmisartan, and there's also been a small trial in Parkinson's with similar drugs that showed significant motor and non-motor improvements. And then the second treatment group here is terazosin. That's also an antihypertensive, and it's used to treat an enlarged prostate. We'll be providing that in the trial at 5 milligrams, again taken once per day. And we think that might work because it activates the PGK1 enzyme, which protects dopaminergic neurons in the brain. Again, data shows a reduced risk of Parkinson's diagnosis in users and slower progression. And there has been a small Parkinson's trial that showed significant motor improvements. So both of those will be compared to a single matched placebo group. So everyone that takes part in the trial will take 1 capsule per day, regardless of the arm they're allocated to. And then the treatment group 3 will open hopefully within a year's time, and then we'll introduce that into the protocol and into all the trial information. In terms of who can take part in the trial, we've tried to keep this as broad as possible so that everyone that wants to take part hopefully can. We wanted to make sure that opportunity was as wide as it could be. So this is just a brief summary of the main inclusion exclusion points. We do have a full document on the website with a lay version of the full inclusion exclusion criteria. But the main ones are you need to have a diagnosis of Parkinson's, and this needs to have been given once you're age 30 or over. You do need to be taking dopaminergic treatment, and you need to be eligible for at least one active treatment arm. So those two treatment groups will each have their own inclusion exclusion criteria that's relevant to them and who it's safe to take those drugs. You have to be eligible to take at least one of them. So there's no way someone could join the trial and they're only ever going to be able to take placebo, for example. The main exclusion criteria is if there's any other cause for your Parkinsonism, some specific PDG mutations, so Parkin, PINK1, DJ1. If there's any reason you're unable to complete the study requirements, which we hope having those remote visits will help to mitigate that. And also if you're having advanced Parkinson's treatment, so for example, deep brain stimulation surgery. And our goal here is really to recruit a participant population that's representative of people with Parkinson's in the UK. So we've tried to make the trial as accessible and as inclusive as possible. And then if you were to take part in the trial, this is just a brief overview of what all of those study visits will look like. The very first step here, which I'll come to a bit later on, is an online registration form, and then there would also be a telephone call. The purpose of both of those is to really try and get a good understanding as to whether you're likely to be eligible for the trial. Because that first screening visit, that does have to take place in person. It will take a few hours to complete, and we want to make sure we're inviting people to that because we think they're likely to be able to take part in the trial. So once you get to that point at that screening visit, there'll be an in-detail discussion about the trial. You've already have had some discussions already with the site staff, and that's just to make sure you understand what's required and that you definitely want to take part. If you do want to take part at that point, then you'll be asked to sign the consent form, and then there'll be some additional eligibility checks to make sure that it's safe for you to take part. That includes some blood samples being taken and some trial assessments as well. After that point, if there's any reason that any of those assessments or those blood checks come back and say, unfortunately, you can't take part, the site staff will call you and they'll discuss that with you. But otherwise, if you're able to, the next step will be to have a baseline visit. This can be completed from home if you prefer. They'll double check eligibility just in case anything's changed. There'll be some online assessments to complete using an online database and some site assessments as well that can be done via video or telephone call. You'll be randomized to your treatment arm, which neither yourself nor the site staff will know what you've been randomized to. And then that will produce an e-prescription so that our trial pharmacy can get your study medication and post that out to you. So once you receive that medication, there's then a 5-week titration period, and this is where we'll gradually increase the dose of the study medication if we need to. During this 5 weeks, you'll have a weekly phone call from the site team just to check how you're getting on, make sure that you're happy taking the study medication, check if there's any side effects you want to discuss, and just to monitor in case there's anything you're concerned about. And then after that period, there'll be study visits at 3 months, 6 months, every 6 months after, up into 3 years. Again, all of those are optional, in-person or remote. At each of those, there'll be a number of trial assessments to do. Most of those can be done from home in an online database. There'll be safety checks and there'll be checks of side effects just to make sure that you're getting on okay with the trial medication. And so in total, there'll be 9 visits as part of the trial. And then additionally, there's a remote follow-up visit at 38 months. So that will be 2 months after you come off the study medication. And that's to check in and make sure that you're still feeling okay after stopping the medication. And in terms of taking the treatment, so this is very much just for those first 2 treatment arms we're recruiting to at the moment. It's 1 capsule per day, and it's recommended to take that at the same time. It can be taken with or without food. You can take this in addition to your usual Parkinson's medication. Don't have to come off that or change that. And as I mentioned, this will be delivered to your home, so you don't have to travel to site to collect the medication. And can come through in the post. I think it does have to be signed for, but you should get some notifications as to when that's on its way, and you'll expect that every 6 months. And then I just wanted to run through some of the additional opportunities in the trial. So there's a number of really exciting sub-studies that we're opening that you may have the opportunity to also take part in. The reason we're including these is because there's lots of additional data we can collect here that will help us to better understand Parkinson's and its progression, as well as the treatments that we're testing as part of the trial. So one of these is the digital measure sub-study. This will be offered to everyone that takes part in the trial. And what we'll be using here is a device called Activity. It's a small device, it's placed on your lower back, and this essentially measures your activity, your gait, and mobility. So we'd ask you to wear this for 1 week every 6 months. So at that screening visit, if you were happy to take part in the sub-study, the site staff can help you place this on your lower back, and then they'll give you an envelope so you can post it back after you've worn it for a week. In the future, if you don't want to come in for a visit, they can post that to you. You can put it on and post it back after a week. So again, you don't have to go into sites to take part in this sub-study. There's no active tasks that you have to do. This will just collect data as you carry on about your day, and you won't have to complete anything except for taking it off and posting it back to us. So this will provide us with really detailed digital data over a very specific time period, and all of this can be used in our analysis later on. And then there's also some additional sub-studies where we want to collect some extra samples. So one of these is our genetic samples sub-study. Again, this is offered to everyone who takes part in the trial. This is in collaboration with PD Frontline. So we'll be asking for a blood sample at the screening visit. PD Frontline will test that for GBA and LOCK2 genes, and then they will take it from there and get back to you with any results and anything else you need. But they'll also share those results with us, and they will also share that sample with the GP2 study. And they will do full genomic sequencing, which I couldn't tell you exactly what that is, but they will get lots of extra data they'll be able to share with us as well, so that we better understand whether any of these medications work differently depending on genes. And then there's a biosample sub-study. So this will be open at selected sites across the UK. Very much depends on the site's facilities as to whether they can open this sub-study. And this is where we'll be asking for additional blood samples and also cerebrospinal fluid samples. There's 3 different options here, and if you were interested in taking part, you can choose to take part in all of those additional samples or just some of them. They'll collect those at different time points, and you would need to go into site in person to provide those samples. So that's why we've tried to make it flexible so you can pick what would work for you. And then there's also the partner sub-study. So this is for partners of people with Parkinson's who take part in the study. What we wanted to do here is to collect the partner's perspective as well, not on the person with Parkinson's and how they're finding things, but on their own well-being and quality of life. So if the partners were interested in taking part, the person with Parkinson's does have to consent to this. So it's never going to be a case of if you don't want them to take part, they can do it anyway. It's very much you both have to agree. And then they'll be asked to complete online questionnaires, again, about themselves at different time points throughout the study. And we can combine all of this data to help us understand the wider effect the treatments might be having. And I also just wanted to touch on the patient and partner input and impact into the trial. So we've had input from our PPA working group on every single working group that's taken part in the project and across various different areas. So I've already mentioned treatment selection, but they've also been involved in our site selection, outcome measures selection, thinking about that design and now the delivery of the trial, all the participant-facing documents, and our funding and the proposals that we prepared to get funding for the trial. And some of the ways that impact has helped us to design a trial that's hopefully more acceptable for people with Parkinson's to take part in, and we hope will be a positive experience of participation. So we've touched on choosing between in-person and remote appointments and that flexibility. I also just wanted to highlight that all of the trial appointments are on medication assessments only, so you won't be asked to come off your medication for any of those study visits. We've included patient-reported assessments, and we hope this focuses on what really matters to people with Parkinson's, and that's really what we want to measure here. Particularly our primary outcome measure is a participant-reported assessment. So it's you telling us how you think things have changed rather than the site staff telling us. There's also a detailed feedback questionnaire that we've put together very much with our PPIE working group. So this is optional. But it will be sent to you at 3 different time points throughout the trial, and it's really your opportunity to tell us how you found things, whether the information you've received covered everything, whether it's delivered in a way that's acceptable, how you found different aspects of the delivery and the sub-studies, for example, and we can take all of that information, make changes as we go, and hopefully continue to improve the delivery as it's running. And there'll also be an anonymous feedback portal in addition to this. So if there was anything specific you wanted to let us know, but you didn't want to let the site team know for any reason, you can fill in this form online, and it means that the design team and the delivery team can think about this, and we can work with the site to make changes and improvements as needed. And we also have several trial-funded staff members at selected sites. So they are in roles where they're dedicated to the trial, its recruitment and retention, and they'll be able to support, hopefully, long-term and diverse recruitment at their sites. They'll all be working together in a wider network so they can share knowledge and updates and hopefully overcome challenges together. And we really hope that will make a difference in terms of that site communication that you have as well. So in terms of how you can take part if you're interested, there's a QR code there that will go through to a registration of interest page. We also have some flyers on the desk outside that have the link that you can use for that as well. So this registration of interest form is the very first step to recruitment. It essentially will collect some contact details from you, some basic information about your Parkinson's diagnosis, and you can also select your preferred site as well. And this will tell us if there's any immediate reason why you wouldn't be eligible to take part in the trial. It will pop up and tell you, so you'll know straight away and you'll know why. If there's anything you're not sure about, that's fine. It will go through to the site team that you select. They can have a look, and the next step will be that they'll give you a phone call and they can discuss all of this with you and discuss whether you may be able to take part or if there's any reason why you might not be able to. So we hope it's a nice, simple, quick online form. Again, we've had PPI input into that, but you can submit that at any time, and that will come through. And then when sites open, they'll get all of their information through and they can start making phone calls and reaching out to participants straight away. So once you do submit that form, next step will be a phone call from the study team. I'll highlight here because I'm not sure if it's on the next slide. Different sites at the minute already have different levels of waiting lists for site staff to get through the phone calls. If there's any sites that are really busy, we'll update that registration of interest form to say at the top, this site, for example, has a very long wait list, and then you can factor that in and decide whether you're happy to wait or you'd rather select a different site, for example. But you'll also get updates once you submit that registration of interest form, where we'll let you know what sites are opening, what wait lists we're looking at, or when you should expect a telephone call. After that telephone call, if the site team thinks you may be able to take part, they'll book you in for that screening appointment that we've gone through. After that screening appointment, they'll always give you another call and say, yes, you can definitely take part, and then they'll move on to baseline. If there's any reason you can't take part after that, they'll still call you and let you know. They'll hopefully be able to discuss some other studies with you that you may be able to take part in the future. Or there's also a Join Parkinson's Research Registry that we've recently launched. I think I've got that in a couple of slides, which you can sign up to hear more about other research opportunities as well. So in terms of the rollout, recruitment has launched. I have on there University College London Hospitals and Newcastle who are open to recruitment. We now also have sites in Bath and Homerton open as well. We had more than 800 registrations at this time point when I put the slides together. I think it's more than 1,100 now, which is very much why we want to keep you in the loop with any sites that are particularly popular and have long waiting lists. And we're working on opening the rest of those sites, and we hope we'll have them all open by March next year. And you can just see on the map there kind of the coverage across the UK. And we're working to try and get a site in every major region open as quickly as we can. So in terms of keeping in touch or reading any more information, we have a lot more information and all of the trial documents available on the website. So it's just EJSACT-PD.com. The full participant information sheets are on there if you want to have a look through them. And there's other helpful documents such as the lay eligibility document I mentioned. There's also an FAQs document on there. And we have now a dedicated inbox as well. So if you have any questions, but you haven't been assigned to a site yet, you can reach out to that inbox and we'll be able to get back to you. If you do want to hear about other studies, I've mentioned Join Parkinson's Research Registry. That QR code there is for JPR, and you can register on there and we'll send out updates about EJS ACT-PD. But if you weren't eligible or if there's other studies you're interested in, they'll also send you information about other trials as well. So just different research opportunities will be sent through there. And thank you very much for everyone that's here today. And also big thank you to all of our funders and collaborators, and also particularly our PPIE working group for helping make all of this happen. Thank you.
So we've got 10 minutes for questions, if anyone has any questions for Georgia. And while we're doing these questions, I will ask Michelle and Kevin to come up and sit on the stage, please, as part of the final session.
To me, one of the main reasons why we've not had a breakthrough in Parkinson is that we're throwing drugs on Parkinson as if it is one disease, when it's a biologically very diverse disorder. Now that you have such international collaboration, isn't it time to think about subdividing your Parkinson's into biologically distinct groups and give them what you think is the most likely to be effective?
That for me. I might hand that over to Tom.
Yeah, perfectly right. We'll be collecting genetic data, and we're collecting, wet biomarker data at the start. We're hoping that the drugs we're selecting will be relevant to the majority of people. So if there is a signal in a large subgroup, we'll pick it up. It's a large trial against placebo. But we will certainly have a priori subgroups to analyze to see if there is a large group that has inflammation at baseline that responds to an anti-inflammatory, or a mitochondrial deficit at baseline that responds to a mitochondrial drug. So very much we want to think about the importance of precision medicine, but we're not selecting drugs that we think are only going to help a small group. We're deliberately selecting drugs that we think will be relevant to a larger proportion of patients. And so we can be more inclusive and find drugs that are relevant to a larger group of patients with PD. It's a real sit on the fence answer.
Can I just follow on? Are there groups of patients who are unlikely to respond to the drugs you are giving? In which case, can you remove those from the trial and put them in a different trial? Yeah.
So that's the reason for some of our exclusion criteria. So people that have very young onset Parkinson's, so before the age of 30, they've almost certainly got a single gene that's much more likely to be a mitochondrial disease than an alpha-synucleinopathy. And so those patients should go into a different type of trial, not EJS ACT-PD. Most people will be eligible, and that's why we're going to have a huge amount of interest in this trial. There are a few things like deep brain stimulation, for example, where we know someone can come to an appointment and someone can adjust their DBS settings and they walk out enormously better than when they walked in. And that's going to make it really difficult to find a subtle effect of a long-term disease-modifying drug. So that's why we've had to exclude DBS patients from this trial. But it's small practicalities. But most, I mean, I can talk for ages now. I won't bore you about alpha-synuclein seed amplification assays and other things that we could do. But we're trying to be relevant, but also have the ability to become precise in the longer term.
Just picking up on that idea of screening, you showed that the exclusion criteria for this trial are the genes PINK1 and DJ1. I remember last meeting I was at, I was shocked at how long it took for the Ambrexol trial to get the DNA scans done. Is that going to, the time frame was at least a year for one person. Is that going to affect your trial? And if that is the case in the UK, why can we not ensure that the DNA testing is much, much quicker than it currently is?
Tell me when you want to answer this.
Go for it.
So we're not going to genotype everybody before they come into the trial, because as you say, it will take a year before we have the results. So people who are known to have Parkin PINK1 DJ1, they're excluded. It's not many, but there's a few, especially in the bigger neuroscience centre. Someone that's aged under 30, even if they haven't been genotyped, they're very likely to have something, so they're also excluded. We will be collecting DNA of everybody, and that DNA will be genotyped with PD frontline, and they test for GBA and LRRK2. And then we can look at subgroups. Do our LRRK2 patients respond differently? Do our GBA patients respond differently? And they will pass DNA to GP2, and they'll have the whole genome sequencing done. And then we can look to see in the really rare mutations, or whether there are genes across the whole genome which affect telmisartan response or affect terazosin response, or other genes that affect the rate of progression of Parkinson's disease, and we need to adjust for that. So we're not going to get those results at the start to make decisions, but we'll have those by the end of the trial in order to do our analyses. The reason it takes so long, so LRRK2 and GBA, I suppose, could be quicker, but PD Frontline is working on a pretty skeleton staff, and so they use the resources they have. GP2 has much more funding, but they're doing the whole genome sequencing. That used to take 20 years to do, and doing it in a year now is is progress. Yeah.
This is again, I think, for Tom. Did I hear right that the big test of effectiveness will be patient self-reporting? So did you feel better? Because that sounds, on the face of it, incredibly impressionistic. Can you explain why it's not?
So it's a combination of things that have led to us choosing that. Firstly, it's our patients and their care partners who are in our PPI group who have emphasized what matters, whether a drug is deemed successful or not, is whether people actually feel better as a result of taking it. If I say you're better because your finger taps are faster, then what good is that to most people? It doesn't really help. It may be objective for me, but it's not subjectively useful to the people that are going to be using these drugs in the long term. So patient-reported outcome is what we're trying to achieve, to make people feel better. We're combining part 1 of the MDS-UPDRS, which is the non-motor symptoms, and part 2, which is how motor symptoms impact on activities of daily living, because both are important, motor and non-motor, and I'm sure Kevin and Michelle will want to comment on this. But before making that decision, we talked to the creators of the scale and said, well, can we combine these? Is it valid clinometrically to use the sum of these two? And they said, yes, that's absolutely fine. And we've looked to see how that sum score of the motor and non-motor symptoms changes over time in the CPP data set. And that's looking at clinical trials and observational studies from thousands and thousands of people that have been collected before to see how does this number change over time. And it's really robust. It changes slowly, but it changes in people at the start of the disease, at the mid stage, at the end of the disease, at a fairly consistent rate. So even if it's a bit impressionistic, a bit noisy, it does change over time. And 3 years and 400 people in each drug arm is enough to detect a change, and it's relevant to patients. If we find a digital, this wearable can forecast the change reliably in 6 months, then of course we have that data and we can say to the regulators, we don't need to do it for 3 years anymore. We've got data that changes in 6 months.
Right.
But today, the regulators won't accept that.
Just to add to that, the part 1 and part 2 questionnaires ask questions, for example, do you have trouble getting dressed? Never, sometimes, occasionally, often, all the time. And it's assessed over the past week or past month. Whereas with the clinician-based assessments, you're in the clinic one time and 1 day, and subject to more variability, potentially.